Looking back at my time at Bishop O'Byrne High School, I have had various experiences that exemplify myself as a habits of mind learner. Join me as I show you how I demonstrate the 8 habits of mind. Let's start with our first habits of mind of persisting/managing impulsivity. Grade 11 was a special year because it is the year that I learned that starting is the most difficult step to completing a big project. I remember in Chemistry 30 IB when I was assigned my first internal assessment, or IA for short, the task to create my own experiment and write a lab report on it. Oh, here we are. This is my completed chemistry IA that experimented with African black soap. One obstacle I faced was coming up with the actual lab experiment. My chemistry IA saw me attempting to make soap for the first time. And as you probably know, the first time doesn't always work out. Picture this, 2 weeks of sleepless nights spent in trying to brew a successful batch of soap. I tried substituting different types of oils and using different methods of preparing the base to make the soap. None of this worked. Then I replaced the tap water with distilled water. This was a eureka moment as I successfully made soap. The approach I took to figuring out how to make African black soap exemplifies how I can manage this habit because I made various attempts to create the soap until it actually worked. One other experience came out of my chemistry IA, and that was me pulling my first all-nighter. I was intimidated by the daunting task of writing my IA and thus procrastinated. I exemplify my ability to manage impulsivity and be persistent by learning from my mistakes. When grade 12 came along with an additional 5 more IAs to do, I got started well in advance of the deadline by creating general outlines for each and making myself personal deadlines. This reduced my stress and helped me overcome procrastination. This is my strongest habits of mind because I see challenges for me as opportunities to see where my strengths and weaknesses lie and improve upon such discovery. I am also a very determined person. Thus, when I set my mind to something, I remain persistent in that activity until I am satisfied. I easily learn from my mistakes to improve upon my approach next time the opportunity arises. Now, let's see how I exemplify the second habits of mind, which is striving for accuracy. Let me introduce you to my other IAs. I'm sorry, this is a lot of paper, yet these papers alone exemplify my efforts to strive for accuracy. Unlike my Rush Chemistry IA, I printed out various drafts of each of these other IAs to proofread them and mark them against the provided rubrics. I repeated this until I was satisfied with my work. Through striving for accuracy, I learned the importance of reviewing the rubric before completing my project, as well as communicating with teachers for additional support. Through CAS, the IB program challenged me to transfer the skills I learned in the classroom to experiences outside the classroom. Consider applying past knowledge to new situations and what I learned through the Socratic seminars in TOK class. In these seminars, we were graded not only based on how we talked about the prescribed topics, but also how we listened to others, responded to others' opinions, and encouraged others to speak their minds. These skills were easily transferable when it came to my involvement in the District Student Advisory Council, or SAC for short. In grade 10, I was nervous to speak my mind. After experiencing Socratic seminars in TOK in grade 11, I returned to SAC with more willingness to share my opinion. In grade 12, I was able to transfer what I learned from SAC and Socratic seminars to advocate for change to the Minister of Education on the Minister's Youth Council. I also exemplified the habits of mind of thinking interdependently/listening with empathy and understanding through my participation in these groups. In fact, I've learned that they have many themes in common. 1. Be supportive, patient, and willing to hear other people's perspectives. 2. Understand that people actually care about what you say. 3. Do not be afraid to speak up and share your thoughts. Participating in group discussions and group work has helped me develop these habits of mine because I learned about the importance of having diverse opinions when attempting to come up with a solution to big issues. Next up, thinking and communicating with clarity. I believe that this is my weakest habit of mind. In oral communication, I have a few obstacles that I face. 1. When talking about something I'm passionate about, I often talk really fast. And 2. My use of proper vocabulary is sometimes lacking. Let me give you an example. Instead of saying, in the morning, I like to drink mochas, I would more likely say, some mornings, I like to drink hot chocolate with a bit of coffee in it. These two challenges pose a problem for me when I ask a peer or a teacher a question. I may end up confusing them with my limited vocabulary or my fast speech. Ways that I challenged myself to improve was to take a deep breath before responding to someone, knowing that I'm not obligated to respond to them immediately after they ask their question. Another thing was to process what I was going to say before saying it, and also write down any questions I had before I asked them. Through the individual oral commentary I did for English IB, I exemplified this habit by preparing a script beforehand. In the actual assessment, I presented with confidence. This also helped me with my written communication skills, as I was limited to how much work I actually brought into the assessment. Therefore, my writing had to be clear and concise. Cutting was tough, however I see this as advantageous because I was forced to be clear and concise. These limits helped me achieve this habit. When reflecting about how I exemplified the habits of mind of thinking about thinking, it reminds me of how I learned to learn through my challenges in Physics IB. Don't get me wrong, I love the sciences, but it seemed like physics was not my strong. In Physics 20 IB, I often studied independently, like reading through the textbook and writing notes. This method somewhat worked, but sometimes I would not get the results I wanted. In Physics 30 IB, I continued this study method. After realizing that this was not going to work, I focused on doing more practice questions. From grade 11 to grade 12, my study habits changed. Throughout my high school career, being a proactive student included questioning and posing problems. Throughout high school, I exemplified this habit of mine by approaching teachers during tutorials and asking questions during class. In Physics 30 IB, creating my own hypothesis and carrying out experiments also helped me fill in gaps in my learning. After learning about the concept of interference patterns, I carried out an experiment at home to see if the theory actually worked. Using a needle, a piece of paper, a flashlight, and the darkness of my bedroom, I produced my own interference pattern. When reflecting on how I exemplify the habits of mind of creating, innovating, and thinking flexibly, it brings me back to grade 11, when I entered into this international STEM competition called the Breakthrough Junior Challenge.
Life is like a game of chess. You need an effective strategy to win. Put this into context and you're playing a game against COVID-19. So what's our strategy? Early January 2020, the genetic sequence for SARS-CoV-2 was released on a public database. This is like COVID-19's viral recipe book. Different recipes create different parts of the virus. A recipe is an mRNA sequence. This spike protein has the potential in developing a vaccine. One type is an mRNA vaccine, and if successful, could revolutionize the history of vaccinology. So what does that...
I created a video about COVID-19 and mRNA vaccine technology. I was able to practice this habit because creativity was one of the elements assessed in the competition. I achieved an inventive way to convey my information through a skit. Seeing that I scored in the top 5% internationally is a testament to how inventive my presentation was. All that was used was my acting, some stop motion, and iMovie. I did run into some difficulties though, such as having to restart some stop motion scenes just hours before the deadline. A lot of submissions were done using professional editing software, so I was pretty proud with how I did with the resources I had. I learned how to think flexibly from being involved in the Mary Poppins production at Ball.
A shining in some willow, pillar of post. They all have their problems, but he's more than most. My heart song! Where is my love? You let my little lark out of his cage. Now you're bare for bright of my Brimstone and treacle. We didn't do it. Brimstone and treacle. Just
As an actor, I was challenged to become really creative with my character, the antagonist Miss Andrews, by creating a backstory and playing around with different persona. Ultimately, the ability for me to believe in what I envisioned as my end product in my character or my video helped others believe in the production as well. This is not it for my habits of mind. In fact, I think I'll continue to use all the skills I've learned in the future, especially when I go on to my career in engineering and possibly politics later on. Well, see you then, and thank you for joining me in this video.